Good morning. Let's talk about reading and developing your English through reading, because I've been talking a lot about reading lately. I read a lot. I've always read a lot. So ever since I was a kid, I remember the first time I went to a real library. I had to take my cousin with me to help me carry home the books. I think I checked out like 30 books at the time. They were all Hardy Boys. So I got into Hardy Boys, then I started reading Louis L'Amour. So I've always had a thing for series. When you can follow the characters along, that's always fun. And you know, a lot of books nowadays are written in series anyways, at least a trilogy. Some of them I've seen series as long as 20, 30 books, you know. So you find a character you like and you read along with them. And reading is an important way to develop your English skills, develop your vocabulary, as we've talked about before. So the beginning of the year, talking about myself personally, the beginning of the year I started reading a lot of fiction, specifically sci-fi, alien sci-fi, and because I started a personal project of writing. I've always written a lot of stories and creating stories for my English students, but they're usually like mini stories, so I thought, why not make these bigger actual books? So last year I think I wrote like 13 books and 10 short stories. Some of the books were longer, normal sized books, others were a little shorter, like novelettes. But I started reading because I wanted to see how I felt, what parts of other books made me feel something, really touched me, learn vocabulary, new ways of expressing ideas. And so that was actually why I started reading so much again. And this year, I think I've read, at the last count, last time I saw on my Goodreads account, I had read 58 books. So it'd been mostly fiction, and then recently I started reading nonfiction because I just wanted to generate a lot of ideas, learn how to do things better, areas of interest, especially since I have a Kindle Unlimited account, which means I can read unlimited amounts of books, well, as much as my time will allow, right? So I started picking books from finance and business, sales and marketing, health and wellness, self-help and personal development, and I was reading through them one by one. And then I saw somebody on YouTube talking about how famous people read, people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett reading at least a book a day. And somebody came up, made the suggestion of reading 5 books at a time. And I thought that was interesting. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, Ty Lopez, and he was talking about Bill Gates, because he said that Bill Gates takes like 6-week retreats where he goes off just to read, to get away and to read and to generate ideas. And like his favorite time, happiest time, is when he gets on his plane, because there's nobody to bother him and he can just focus on reading. So the idea is that as you read a book, you get an idea, and then you start reading a different book and you get another idea, and then you read a third book and get another idea, and soon all these ideas are bouncing around and you're able to think differently about those ideas. You're not just following the linear sequence of a single idea, but you actually have different ideas working together that you can adapt and invent something new. So that was an interesting idea, and I decided to try that out. So I've been bouncing around from different nonfiction books and fiction books. So Yeah, and then I also jumped into MentorBox because they have these short book reviews, not book reviews, but it's like the actual author themselves sitting down to take you through the key lessons in the book. And that was an interesting way of consuming the content, because not only do you get to read the book and hear what they have to say, but also you hear the author telling you why that's important, why that was included in there. And that's an interesting way to get those summaries as well. So applying this to your English learning, specifically the main reason that you should read if you're learning English. Obviously, if reading's good in any area of life, especially, like when you want an idea in a certain area, hear what someone has to say. Like somebody said, I heard recently in a YouTube video, that we learn from our mistakes, but they don't have to be our own mistakes, right? We can learn from other people's mistakes. So reading is good in general, but specifically if you want to learn English, reading is good because it's a great way to develop vocabulary in context. This was something I did when I was learning Portuguese. Reading, it's really good at any level of English. It's important to read. I did this specifically when I was at an advanced level of Portuguese. I could already read. I could already understand and speak and communicate fairly well. So what I would do was take magazines and I would read those articles, and underline all the words I didn't know. But I didn't just immediately stop to go look them up. I would read several articles because they were related to specific themes. Then as I would read, some of those words would become clear just from the context. I would see that same word used in different ways. And these were like professional magazines, news magazines. So there were lots of articles about different topics: law, business, human interests, things that were going on. And as I would read, I would see the same words that I didn't know used over and over in different contexts. So I would often pick up the meaning of those words right from the context. Then when I would go back through and look at those words, I'd be like, oh, I know what this word means now. So at the end, like maybe 50-60% of the words I would pick up just through the context. And then when I would go back through, I would actually look up the words that I still didn't understand or were kind of fuzzy. Like some words, you know what they mean if you see them used in context, but you don't actually know how to define it or how to explain it to someone, or even feel comfortable using it yourself. But you still understand how it's used, right? If you hear somebody use it, it's like, okay, but you just can't use it yourself yet. So then I would actually go through and look up those fuzzy words that I still didn't know, and I would look up the meaning in the dictionary and create phrases with them or whatever, just to really master them. So there's some interesting research that I saw recently. Well, not recently, too recently. This was a little while back, but basically the idea is that the English students, when they start off, they have a hole in the road here. They reach a point where they feel like they're not developing. They kind of plateau. Talked a little bit about that over the past few days. And the way they need to go from that high beginner to the low intermediate stage is to increase their vocabulary. And the best way to do that is through reading. This was shown by their research. So there's kind of a paradox here, because For a student to reach, based on their research, for a student to reach an intermediate level of English, they need to read. But students have trouble reading because they still don't have the intermediate vocabulary level, right? So you have to read to reach the intermediate level and to learn those words and reach that level. But since you don't know the vocabulary, it's hard to read. So there's kind of a friction point there where, as an English student, if you're in that place where you're not feeling your English develop, then reading is probably the number one thing you need to do to take your skills to the next level. So there's one thing I can give you here today. That would probably be it. Start reading more in English. You can use text and audio to develop all the skills you need, the necessary primary and sub skills to develop your English. So primary skills being reading, writing, listening, speaking. You've got the text, you can read it, you can, listen to it if you have the audio. You can rewrite it yourself, do dictation to practice your writing. You can make up your own questions and write them out to practice your skills based on the text. And then you can speak about it, talk about it with other people. So then the sub skills, you've got vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and even included with vocabulary is the use of expressions, idiomatic expressions. So all of that's included in there. So go through, like I said, you can underline the vocabulary words, learn what those mean. You take see the grammar structures, how those words are used, how sentence structures are formed in English, to actually assimilate them yourself so you can reproduce them and use them. And then the practicing of your pronunciation with the audio, so you can do audio exercises, listen, repeat, practice those sounds to reduce your accent. There's a lot of amazing things that you can do with reading, and when you have the text and audio, develop all the skills that you need as an English student to improve your English and take it to the next level. All right, so just to wrap this up for today, books that I'm reading, I'm going to talk about those in a separate video just because this video is already getting pretty long here. But last night I started a new fiction book called, what's the name of it? The Naturalist, kind of a mystery book about a scientist who goes out into the woods to work on a project, and someone's killed and he's accused of the murder. So there's a mosquito in my car here. So the police think that he's the person who killed her. He ends up talking with him, and they've discovered that he wasn't, so they think it's a bear, and they catch a bear, but he doesn't believe that it was a bear that killed his friend, and so now he's after the killer, even though the police don't believe him really. So it's kind of a complicated story, but it's interesting. And I read another book by Carlos Cicada, which is called Work Like an Immigrant. That was a fun read. There's a lot of good stories in there. A Brazilian guy who talks about his life experiences and working to become a top consultant. So, a lot of good stuff. Keep you posted. We'll talk more. Y'all have a good day, and bye-bye.